This is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History for Thursday, the 18th of February in the year of our Lord 2021. God, I feel old. I remember when the year 2000 was the far future. By this time, we should have had moon bases, everyone should be wearing turtlenecks, we should have hover cars, and matter-to-matter, point-to-point transmission. So you could beam somewhere. We should have ray guns, and instead we get COVID-19. So, go figure. The dreams of futures past. What we have been talking about is the Gospel of John. Gospel of John is different from the Synoptic Gospels. It has a different source in that John is not drawing primarily from St. Peter, but from his own memories and recollections and interviews. John is also going to focus less on the Galilee and more on the Judean region around Jerusalem. John is a gospel designed against the Gnostics, a gospel written at a time when the Romans and the Jews had become more hostile to Christianity and when Christianity had grown. And it is a gospel where Jesus is often interrupted and forced to argue his point, which allows him to explain more. There are fewer signs than there are miracles in the Synoptic Gospels, but these signs include the most powerful that Jesus does, which is the resurrection of Lazarus from the dead. So, we've looked at Matthew, Mark, and Luke in terms of how they deal with the trial of Jesus before Pilate. What we're now going to do is look at how John deals with it. So, let's go ahead, and you see a page that starts with 28. They took Jesus from. And that page is from my version of the New Revised Standard Bible, which is the same translations that were used in those synoptic gospel things that we took yesterday. It is a fairly modern rendition of the Greek into English. And it also, because it's the New Revised Standard Version, I can't believe I bought this, but I did, because I wanted the newest version, has a bunch of gender-neutral language that's friendlier to the women's. Less mankind and more humanity stuff. Everyone will feel included then. So, I'm going to start, and then if people want, they can pick up and join me in reading. So what we're doing is we're mentally comparing this to what we did yesterday. You should have your notes out. So you're reading along with her? Okay, that's nice. 28. Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. Caiaphas is the high priest of the Sanhedrin. These are the Jewish priests that decided Jesus must die, but they also decided they wanted the Romans to do it. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters, so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves, and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die. Would somebody like to take over from verse 33 for a while? Crickets. Crickets. And hi Zoe. Yes, thank you. Okay, why don't you read this paragraph from 33 until where it says after he said this. Please, okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, some of this is a bit blurry on that
side.
side.
You just have to guess, and if you want my help, I'll help.
Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "You asked this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, My kingdom is not from this world.
If my kingdom.
Okay. If my kingdom or more from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here. Pilate asked him, so are you a king? Jesus answered, you say I am king, for this I was born, and for this came into the world to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. Pilate asked him, what is the truth?
Okay. And you can picture this. It's sort of a cynical government official dealing with a religious figure who truly believes. What is truth? Pilate says. Thank you, Zoe. Good job. Does anyone wish to do it next? If you don't, I'll do it. Thank you. Please.
After he had said this, he went out
To the Jews.
to the Jews again and told them, I find my case against you, but you have a custom that I release someone for you
At the Passover.
at the Passover. Do you want me to release
To you.
The king? They shouted in reply, not this man,
But
Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a
bandit. Keep going.
Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged, and the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him, shouting, Hail, King of the Jews, and striking him on the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, Look, I am bringing him out to you to look up
to let you know.
Oh, to let you know. Oh, did I find no case against him? So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, Here is the man. When the chief priests and the priests saw him, they shouted, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no case against him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die because he is claimed the Son of God.
Thank you. Does somebody wish to carry on from here? Thank you.
Now when Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever. He entered his headquarters again and asked Jesus, Where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, You refuse to speak. Do you not know that I have power to release you and power to crucify you? Jesus answered, You have no power over me unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, the one over to you is guilty of the greater sin. From then on, Pilate tried to release him, but the Jews cried out, If you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be sets himself against the emperor.
Okay. When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and sat on the judge's bench at a place called the Stone Pavement, or in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover, and it was about noon. He said to the Jews, Here is your king. They cried out, Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him! Pilate asked them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but the emperor. Then he handed them over to be crucified. Now, you can see this is where we are. You can see the greater detail that John goes into than all three other Gospels. John has byplay back and forth between Pilate and Jesus. The crowd is even more emphatic, and they go into more detail about, they do the blackmail thing of, we have no king but Caesar. We're so loyal to Caesar. You Jews, I know how loyal you are to Caesar. Now, this is the most modern version of the translation from the Gospel of John. Flip to the next page, and you will see from the Old Catholic Bible, a Bible that's not based on the Greek directly. This page here that starts with the subtitle Jesus Before Pilate is from what is called the Douay Bible. The Douay Bible is a translation of a French Bible into English. The French Bible came from what was called the Vulgate, which was the Latin translation of the Bible from the Greek. So the one we just read is from the modern interpretation from Greek directly into modern English. What this page is is translation from Greek to Latin back in the late ancient times, early Middle Ages. From Latin then to French, from French then to English. So I know it's going to take a while, but it's worth it to see how much difference, if there is any, between these two translations. This is important because there are people who claim to believe in every literal word of the Bible. I don't deny that. I respect religious beliefs, even when I don't share them. But when you talk about literal translation, it is important that you understand. Jesus spoke in Aramaic. The New Testament is in Greek. That's a translation. Jesus spoke in real time. The New Testament is written inspired by God decades after. Jesus was there. He's a single guy. The New Testament Gospels are written by 4 different people. 3 of them used Peter's ideas. 1 of them went his own way. And then you've got the translations of the Greek into English. When they happen, to what language, is it direct, is it indirect? All of this is going to affect the words. All of this is going to affect the words. I'm going to make sure, yeah. So this is the Catholic Bible from when back in the mid-20th century. Roman Catholics use a much more modernized version today. So I'll start, and if people want to read again, they can. And there, I think, is less blurriness here. Jesus before Pilate. They therefore led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium. Now it was early morning, and they themselves did not enter the praetorium, that they might not be defiled, but might eat the Passover. Pilate therefore went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They said to him in answer, "If he were not a criminal, we should not have handed him over to thee." Pilate therefore said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews then said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was in fulfillment of what Jesus had said, indicating the manner of his death. Would someone like to take it from here? Please. Pilate and Jesus, yes.
Pilate therefore again entered into the praetorium, and he summoned Jesus and said to him, "Art thou the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Dost thou say this of thyself, or have others told thee?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Thy own people and the chief priests have delivered thee to me. What hast thou done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my followers would have fought that I might not be delivered to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Thou art then a king?" Jesus answered, "Thou sayest it, I am a king. This is why I was born, and why I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?"
Okay. Would somebody take over from there? Sir.
The Jews prefer prophets. And when he had said this, he went outside to the Jews again, and said unto them, I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you wish, therefore, that I release to you the king of the Jews? They all therefore cried out again, Not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a prophet.
Keep going.
Pilate then took Jesus and had him scourged. And the soldiers, plaiting a crown of thorns, put it upon his head, and arrayed him in a purple cloak. And they kept coming to him and saying, Hail, King of the Jews, and striking him.
Okay, would somebody take it from there, please? Yes.
Pilate therefore went again outside and said to them, Behold, I bring him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him. Jesus therefore came forth, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple cloak. And he said to them, Behold the man. When therefore the chief priests and the attendants saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and according to that law he must die, because he has made himself Son of God.
Keep going.
Now when Pilate heard this statement, he feared them more, and he again went back to the praetorium and said to Jesus, Where art thou from? But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, Dost thou not speak to me? Dost thou not know that I have power to crucify thee, and that I have power to release thee? Jesus answered, Thou wouldst have no power at all over me, for it is not given thee from above. Therefore he who betrayed me to thee has the greater sin.
Okay. Somebody want to finish up? We'll pass the bread here. Please.
Pilate's cowardice. And from then on, Pilate was looking for a way to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, "If thou release this man, thou art no friend of Caesar. For everyone who makes himself king sets himself against Caesar." Pilate therefore, when he heard these words, brought Jesus outside, and sat down on the judgment seat, at a place called Lithostrotos,
Yes.
but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the preparation day for the Passover, about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, "Behold your king." But they cried out, away with him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Then he handed him over to them to be crucified. And so they took Jesus and led him.
Okay. We're only going to do this once more. Because the next translation on the next page is from the King James version of the Bible. In the English language, there is no more beautiful literary Bible than the King James. The King James is written just after Elizabethan times. It's got a lot of the same language that Shakespeare uses. But they wrote the King James in an intentionally archaic way. Lots of these and thous and wheretofores. Even though people in the time of King James didn't really speak that way anymore, because they wanted the Bible to seem to have the ring of old knowledge and old wisdom. Also, a lot of Protestants do not use the Revised Standard Bible. A lot of traditional Protestants use the King James Version. So the purpose in reading this third and last version of the story that we're going to read together today has to do with seeing, okay, we've read the modern Protestant and we've read an old Catholic version. There are some minor differences. Let's see if there are any differences with the King James. And I can already see two places where I did a lousy copying job, so I'll do my best to help out there. By the way, if you see light script compared to dark script, the light script is in red. One of the traditional things that you do in the Bible is you can have Jesus' words all in red, and everyone else and every other word is in black. So that stands out. These are the words of the Son of God. So anyway, that's sort of an old-fashioned thing that the King James Bible does. What I'll do is I'll have somebody else start it, and then I will take over just before the messed up area, and I'll try my best to make sense of it. Would somebody... I'll take people who have or haven't read. Okay, so Zoe, will you start us out, please?
Then they take Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out to them, and said, "What accusation bring ye against this man?" They answered and said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up unto thee. And said Pilate unto them, Take ye him, and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die.
Thank you. Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again, and called Jesus, and said unto him, Art thou the King of the Jews? Jesus answered him, Sayest thou this thing of thyself? Or did others tell it thee of me? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Thine own nation and own chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast you to say about that? Jesus says, I do not have a kingdom of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Pilate therefore said unto him, Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Every one that is of the truth heareth my voice. Would you continue from here?
Pilate said unto him, what is true? When he said this, he went out again unto the Jews, and said unto them, I find him in no fault at all. If ye had a custom that I should release unto you one at the Passover, ye therefore I release unto you the Jews. Then they cried, then cried all again, saying, not this man, Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber.
Please continue.
Now Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers put a crown of thorns and put it on his head. And they put on him a purple robe.
Thank you. Would somebody like to? Aaron. We are on verse 3, and said, Hail to the King.
And said, Hail to the Jews. And they smote him with their hands, no fault in him. Then came Jesus forth wearing a crown of thorns and a purple robe. And Pilate said unto him, Behold the man. When the chief therefore and the officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate saith unto them, Take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was went again into the judgment hall, and saith unto Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer. Then saith Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have the power to crucify thee, and that I have the power to release thee? Jesus answered, Thou couldst have no power against me at all, except it were given thee above. Therefore he had delivered me unto that wrath greatest for your sin.
Thank you. And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever makes himself a king maketh against Caesar. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the Pavement, but in Hebrew Gabbatha. And it was the preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour, and he saith unto the Jews, Behold your king. But they cried out, Away with him, crucify him. Pilate said unto them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. Then delivered he him, therefore, unto them to be crucified, and they took Jesus and led him away. Thank you all who read and who listened. That's a lot of the same stuff. But let's look at some of the details John brings up. First off, to avoid defilement before Passover, when Jesus is brought to Pilate by the Jews, they stay outside of the Romans' courtyard, because to enter a Gentile, a non-Jew's place on the day of Passover means that you have to go through a ritual cleansing, which is a giant pain in the neck, and they don't want to do that. So they bring Jesus to them. Jesus goes inside. They don't. And they are going to therefore remain pure. We are not permitted to put a man to death. Well, that's true and not true. The Jews sentence people to stoning all the time. On several occasions in the Gospels, Jesus comes upon usually a woman who's been found guilty of being untrue to her husband. So what they do is the priests find her guilty, and she's brought usually to a pit, and everyone in the neighborhood who feels like it grabs a stone and wings it down until she's dead. That's a horrible way to die. So the Jews conceivably, the Sanhedrin, could have conceivably sentenced Jesus to stoning. But they wanted the Romans to do it. Jesus himself had predicted crucifixion, which is even worse than stoning in many respects. So, the only people who can crucify are the Romans. So because the Sanhedrin, the Jewish temple priests, make this decision that the Romans have to do it, they're going to go for crucifixion, and a lot of the details have to do with the politics of the time. In the discussions with Pilate, Jesus goes back and forth. Pilate asks, "Are you a king?" Jesus says, "Who put that question in your mouth? Who put that idea in your head? Was it them?" Pilate says, "Am I a Jew? I'm asking you a straightforward question. Are you a king?" Jesus says, "Well, those who listen to the truth are of my kingdom. But my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my followers would rebel." And this is where he says, "Those who listen to the truth hear my voice." And Pilate, like any worldly man, will say, "Truth. What is truth? Are your truths the same as mine?" Is the implication there? And this goes back to the old stories of the treaties with the Indians in the United States. White man speak with forked tongue, because white man, in the form of those treaties, would agree to things with the Indians, and the Indian tribes expected that the United States government would stand by their word. But the moment that gold or water or something valuable was found on the land that the U.S. had given to the Indians, there'd be a new reason to reopen negotiations, and the Indians would be moved off the newly valuable land onto wasteland. Again, not one of the prouder parts of American history, but it's a true part. Again and again, the United States broke its government with the same group of Indian tribes, and soon the Indians learned that white men speak with forked tongue. If you're a politician, you don't deal in truth. You deal in pragmatism. So to hear a religious fanatic, which is what Pilate thought Jesus was, talk in terms of the truth, what truth? Your truth, my truth? Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this earth." Pilate says, "So you're not a king. What is truth?" Now, Barabbas, again, here he's described as a bandit. In others, he's described as an insurrectionist. A bandit is a robber. He's a thief that uses armed robbery. An insurrectionist is a political revolutionary. In any case, he's a murderer. Not the kind of person that is of equal status to a religious leader, in most cases. Jesus is scourged, he's mocked, he's dressed. Now, soldiers are not the most sophisticated people in the world very often. They're very basic people. They're courageous, we need them. We honor them, and for good reason. There are 2 days dedicated to soldiers in the United States. There's Veterans Day, dedicated to respecting the living veterans around us, and there's Memorial Day, dedicated to respecting the dead. Why? Because without soldiers, we wouldn't be free. That flag would have been taken over by enemies, foreign or domestic, long ago, and we'd be somebody's slaves. Without the military, we don't keep our freedom. Just like without the police, you don't have law and order. You may not like the police because they pull you over or whatever, but trust me, you would not want to live in a world without police. It would be bad. I know this because I lived in the Bronx, an area where the police didn't have all the power they should have. And I also know people from Somalia and other places around the world where there were no police anymore. There were just gangs. The gangs had military weapons, and nobody controlled them. And it was a hellish life that they lived. So, soldiers sometimes have a very basic sense of humor. My mom was a police detective for 20 years in Wallingford, Connecticut. I say this because I'm proud of her. She had the highest conviction rate on the Wallingford police force during the time she was there. More of the cases that she worked on led to a conviction than anyone else in the force. 2 of her cases were argued before the U.S. Supreme Court. That doesn't happen very often. And her case was solid in front of the U.S. Supreme Court both times. A new police station was built about halfway through my mom's time with the police. And they got a new detective division, and she was a detective. So they invested some money, all the detectives, in a giant tropical fish tank. And this giant tropical fish tank was stocked with every exotic predatory fish you could imagine. They called it the Tank of Death. And whenever school children would be brought in, or criminals who seemed a little sensitive, it would be feeding time in the Tank of Death. And the detectives would laugh and joke and pour in the feeder fish, and they'd get ripped apart in front of everyone. The water would become red and bloody, and then all of that muck would be eaten. Why? Because cops have a sense of humor that's a bit rocky. Why? Because cops deal with the worst people do. Every police officer, without exception, is a hero to me because they deal with people at their worst every day. They deal with husbands who lash out at their wives, wives who poison their husbands, people who betray their trust, thieves, kidnappers, rapists, murderers. And through all of it, they try to be sane enough to come home and be good for their families. My mom did it. Maybe you have relatives who are police. It is an incredibly difficult job. So one of the ways they cope is they laugh. And their sense of humor is rough. They laugh at things that most people, you can't laugh at that. I'm a cop. We laugh at everything. Because sometimes if you don't laugh, you're going to put a bullet in your brain. That's how bad the job can get. Doctors are the same way. There was a famous show called MASH back in the 70s. And it was about doctors during the Korean War. And the original book was written by a guy who was a doctor during the Korean War. He had witnessed it. And the doctors would be, in the midst of a Korean winter, and Korean winters are much worse than anything we have around here. The doctors would be joking one another, warming their hands over the smoking, steaming area of the open wound that they're operating on. They'd tell jokes. They'd laugh at the movement of the intestines. Not because they're evil, but because it's just so horrible. What they're doing is so difficult. Meatball surgery, sewing young men together who've been blasted apart by shrapnel or bullets. You got to do something to keep your sanity, and maybe what you do is you make some dirty, nasty jokes. So when Jesus is brought before the soldiers, they go, "Oh, he's a king? Hey, king! Here, put on this purple robe. Hail, hail, king! Boom! Hail, King Jesus! Boom!" And they beat on him. Why? Because everyone beat on them. Why? Because these were rough men. But good people lie safe sleeping in their beds only because rough men are ready to do violence on their behalf. That's a quote somewhere on these walls from George Orwell, who would know. He was a policeman and a soldier. The soldiers have fun with Jesus, cruel, bully-like fun. They beat on him, they make fun of him, they get a crown and thorns and tap it into his head so he's bleeding all over the place. Ha ha. Is it good? No. But it is not necessarily to the same level as people who want to take an innocent man and have him crucified because he's a political enemy. In any event, Pilate allows this, he orders this, in fact, because what he wants to do is avoid having Jesus' death on his hands. So Pilate says, see, he says in Latin, ecce homo. Ecce homo means behold the man. He's saying to the crowd, behold the man. Look at this man. This man that you say he's trying to make a king. Look at him. He's a mockery. He's a bloody mess. He's got bruises. He's bleeding. He's gasping for air. He's trembling. Look at him. Behold the man. But in his eyes is a calm. There's a moment where actually Pilate says, just after saying, behold the man, ecce homo, where he's sort of taken aback by what's behind Jesus' eyes. This is not what he expects. It's not panic. It's not terror. It's not a whipped dog. It's something else. Something maybe like serenity. Don't you know? Okay, Pilate then calls him back in. And he's asking for Jesus' help. He's, I don't want you. Don't you know that I have the? You're saying, are you king? You say that I am. Don't you know that I have the power to kill you? Don't you know that I have the power to save you? And Jesus, in so many words, says the only power you have comes from beyond, which doesn't help, and annoys Pilate further. And then the high point of hypocrisy. A crowd of people that hates the Romans with an unholy passion, or a holy passion, says to the governor, the Roman governor, he's trying to make himself a king. We have no king but Caesar. If you don't punish him, we'll tell Caesar on you. We'll tell Caesar that you let some guy come along and said who wanted to be king And you didn't protect Caesar's reputation by killing him. We have no king but Caesar. Oh. Okay, so those are the facts of the passage. In the Catholic Bible, they call Pilate's headquarters the Praetorium. Good Latin word. Ecce homo, behold the man, from mocking pity to wonder. You also have a bunch of vivid subsectional headings like Pilate's cowardice. And these are all things designed to help the reader know what's going on. The Bible, Old Testament and New, is really hard to read. It is not an easy book or set of books. It is very complicated. There's a reason why all of Jewish scholarship, rabbinical scholarship, is about how to interpret the Torah. The Talmud of the Jews is their interpretations of their version of the Bible, because it's so complicated. So, making it easier for the reader to understand the point of each section or each paragraph is a kindness that you do to your reader. Also, it can be bad because your idea of what's important in the paragraph may not be the truth. It's just your opinion. Now, in the King James Version, which is the last thing we read, notice there is not Jesus, there is Jesus. There's not Pilate, there's Pilate. Every complicated word is written phonetically. And that's because maybe the reader doesn't know how to say Gabbatha or Pilate or Jesus or whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it even easier for the reader by sounding out every word, so that you know that Jesus is pronounced with a hard E, G, and a soft U, us, Jesus. The purposeful use of archaicisms, the word malefactor instead of criminal, these and thines, plaited a crown on his head. How does that help? It does and it doesn't. It helps in that it grants the Bible an image of authenticity because it sounds all old-fashioned. And remember, if you're pretending to be a wise person, it helps to look like a wise old man. There's a reason why Obi-Wan Kenobi, Gandalf, and Dumbledore are all bearded older men. Because that is, in legends, the typical wise old man. You can have a wise old woman, too. It's not as common, but it does exist. If you're a young person in their teens or 20s and you try to speak with that level of wisdom, it's going to be hard for people to accept. You're not old enough to have earned that wisdom yet. You may learn things from books. Things from books is not the same thing as experiencing decades of life and all the suffering that goes with that. Wisdom always comes from suffering. That's why wisdom is always tinged with an element of sadness. That's a quote from up there by Whittaker Chambers, a man who knew that. So again, the King James Bible is beautiful. But I do find the complicated Elizabethan language a bit of a barrier. It can be a bit of a barrier. Jesus is delivered to the Jews. The red ink and the capitalizations and the italics are all designed to show reverence. When Jesus speaks, his words are in red ink. When we refer to God or him or his, you always capitalize God or him or his. Now, what I'm not going to do in class is go over the Gospel in modern English, which is your next translation. I will simply mention Pilate says, "What have you done anyway?" And the Jews say, "We have no law to put a man to death." Well, stoning. The Gospel, I guess you can look ahead. The page with the picture on it. The page with the picture on it is the Gospel in modern English. And it was written in the 1950s, so you can decide how modern that English is. But what this is an attempt to rewrite the Bible in modern colloquial language, including slang. Does it work? Well, I guess it can. But I can tell you right now, having read this, that modern English from the 1950s is not always easy for us to understand because a lot of the references are outdated. I would prefer actually a straight translation from the Greek without all this, attempt to sort of be cool and use with it terms, because with it terms quickly become forgotten over time. The painting is from my version of the Catholic Bible, and you actually see Jesus is separated by the two pages. So the man who is obscured there in that painting is Jesus. I suppose that's reverent, but it's weird. If I could have gotten a full painting of that, I would, but it's a hard painting to find. Anyway, the guy with the sort of goofy look on his face is washing his hands. That's Pilate. And you got the Jewish leaders looking villainous, arguing against Jesus. Last, you have Jesus and on the next page after the pictures. You have Jesus and Pilate rewritten by a theologian named William Barclay. And what he does is he makes his own translation. Now, again, I have a friend who is a minister, and I have acquaintances who are priests and ministers. One of the things you do in divinity school, which is the college, the graduate school that priests and ministers go to, is you do your own translations. So my friend, to become a Presbyterian minister, had to learn how to read ancient Greek and ancient Hebrew so that he could do his own reading from the original Greek and come to his own conclusions about how to bring that into English. You can't really understand the Bible beyond a certain point unless you speak Greek or Hebrew, which means my understanding is limited because I speak English and bad English. But if you're interested in the way an individual might interpret rather than one of the official Bibles, that's what this is. Why do we spend so much time on it? Because if you're going to talk about Holy Scripture in Christianity, it is not the same as Islam. In Islam, as I had and I will tell you, one man writes the Holy Scripture in one language. So all Muslims should learn the Arabic of the 6th and 7th century AD so that they can understand Muhammad's words in context. But a Muslim can much more easily say to another Muslim, hey, the Quran says this, do it. When a Christian does that, the other Christian can say, well, that's your interpretation of what it means. My interpretation is different. Here's my interpretation. And both Christian interpretations might have validity. Jewish people have the same thing. They discuss and argue the meaning of Scripture. Now, Muslims can do that, but it's much harder to offer alternative viewpoints in Islam because it's one language in one voice. The Bible is so different from that, and I wanted you to see that. Next time, we'll go over the big events in Jesus' life, and next week I'm going to show you a huge amount of film clips showing the scenes we've just read about and showing other things in Jesus' life from different movies about it. So, questions, comments, or thoughts? I don't see any, so thank you.